There'll be a hint of frost, but for most, the cloud, well, keeping the temperatures up. Lows generally about 4 or 5 degrees Celsius, so nothing too frosty for Monday morning's journey into work. A largely dry day on Monday, and that is one of the themes of the weather this week. A largely dry week. I'm hopeful, particularly around the middle of the week, we'll see a little bit of sunshine, and that'll turn things a little bit warmer. So, yes, green shoots of spring, you might say, Andrew.
Many thanks for that. Now, the Labour Party has pledged that if it wins the election, it will create a strong economic foundation for the future and raise living standards. The Tories say Labour would, in fact, keep on borrowing forever, leaving the UK economy vulnerable and saddling future generations with more debt than we could ever hope to repay. The man with Labour's plan for the economy is, of course, Ed Balls, the Shadow Chancellor. Welcome to you, Ed Balls. Now, the SNP say that you are linked to the Tories as an austerity economist, and you have indeed signed up to this £30 billion of contraction in the House of Commons. So what would be the result of simply saying, do you know what, 2015, the deficit doesn't really matter so much?
I think that would be the wrong thing to do. There are some parties who say we don't have to worry about the deficit.
Indeed.
I think they're completely wrong. I think it's
irresponsible.
I think it's irresponsible. I think we need a credible plan to balance the books in the next Parliament, and that's what we are setting out. We'll balance the books in the next Parliament as soon as possible. We'll get the national debt falling. The difference between me and George Osborne is that George wants to go way beyond the difficult task of balancing the books. He wants a £23 billion surplus so he can cut the size of the state. The 1930s. But you asked me about the SNP challenge on the difference, and I'm saying to you the difference is a big ideological plan for a surplus for the biggest cut since the Second World War from the Tories, or a sensible, balanced, fair plan from Labour.
So if you think that the SNP's view of the economy is irresponsible and wrong, you can't possibly do a deal with them. Why can't you as a party simply say the obvious?
Well, first of all, I said any party who says we haven't got to balance the books is irresponsible.
Yeah.
Secondly,
that includes the SNP
we have
at the moment.
no plans, no need, no desire to have any deal with the SNP. This is a party which wants to break up the United Kingdom. They're not going to be able to stand up for the whole of the UK.
So just say the words, I rule it out.
Ed Miliband said it's nonsense. It's not part of our plans. And you know, Andrew, you've been covering politics for 30 years. Parties, large parties at this stage, say we're fighting for a majority, and we are. I'm not going to get involved in speculation about post-election deals. We're fighting for a majority.
Because this might seem a little bit weird. We're talking about the words rule it out. Does that really matter? But if you won't rule out a deal after the election, then that allows the Conservatives to carry on showing Ed Miliband in Alex Salmond's front pocket. You know, it's been very damaging to you. It infuriates the idea of the SNP having a lever on a future Labour government infuriates a lot of English Labour voters. So just say we won't do it.
I don't think it's damaging. I think it's utter nonsense. It's a Tory party trying to deflect attention from David Cameron's cowardice on the TV debates and his refusal to debate.
But to say it's nonsense is not the same thing as saying we won't do it.
The only party who's done a deal with the SNP in the last 10 years is the Tories in Scotland.
There must be
between
some
2011
reason that you can't
and 2000,
rule it out.
Because what we're not going to do at this stage, before an election, is say anything other than we're fighting for a majority. Look, I've got to say to you, if you want to discuss...
It might help you get that majority if you said we rule it out.
Are you going to ask George Osborne today whether or not he's going to do a deal with UKIP?
Yes, I certainly am.
When what we know is, Andrew, Michael Gove and Nigel Farage are apparently good friends. They both agree on leaving Europe and privatising the NHS.
That's the Tories
are the ones who are now vulnerable on the issue of deals. We don't want any deal with the SNP.
I still don't understand. We don't want any deal with the SNP.
It's not part of our plans. It's nonsense. It's not something we want.
And we won't do it.
We're not going to get into any speculation now when what we're doing is fighting for a majority. Look, Andrew, as I said...
Because this is part of the argument ahead of the election. This is part of the dynamics of the political argument.
You've been covering politics for 30 years.
Having done so, I think you're going to have to venture to say we rule out a deal with the SNP.
No large party at this stage gets involved in this kind of speculation. I've got to say, I've always felt coalition politics is corrosive to British public trust, and you're sort of proven right.
So the speculation goes on, I'm afraid. Let's move on to something else.
Well, I think it's the Tories and UKIP who are doing the deal, and it's probably happening in Michael Gove's kitchen.
Maybe it will. How many kitchens do you have, by the way? Per house.
People around the kitchen tables of Britain are debating the dangers from Tory cuts, not how many kitchen tables David Cameron's got.
Now, you say that Conservatives can't be trusted with the NHS because they won't say whether deep cuts are going to fall. Now, you also want to make cuts, not as deep, not as quick. So where are the big cuts going to fall under Ed Balls?
Well, we've set out very clearly over the last few weeks. We've published 8 reviews from our zero-based review, as well as the cut in the winter allowance for pensioners with pensions over 41,000, as well as the child benefit cut cap. We've also said that we would take a 500 million from local government through better procurement and working together, 250 million from policing through abolishing the police commissioner elections and other changes to save money.
These are important
200 million pounds from housing benefit savings,
potatoes.
70 million pounds from the courts. We've set out how we can make savings in DEFRA as well. A whole series of areas, but sensible spending cuts is only part of the plan. You've also got to have fair tax rises at the top, and you need a plan for growth and jobs, which brings in the tax revenues. The reason why George Osborne failed is because he's not brought in the tax revenues in this parliament, because wages have been so stagnant.
Are the things that, after 5 years of a Labour government, the state would not be doing that it's doing now?
Well, we introduced universal winter allowance, and we're going to have to take it away.
You're going to take it, right,
Yes,
so that's one example. Any other bigger examples in terms of the structure of departments? As has been suggested by Taxpayers Alliance, we have too many government departments. We could get rid of entire government departments.
Well, we think through sensible spending cuts, some fair tax rises at the top, and a plan for growth and jobs, we can balance the books without an ideological assault on the state, or having to raise VAT or cut the National Health Service, which I think will be the consequence of George Osborne's plans. He can't find the £70 billion of cuts he's committed to. He can't tell us where his welfare savings will come from. Is he really going to cut 30,000 police officers?
We'll come to all of that.
Armed forces back to the 18th century?
You mentioned the armed forces now. Now, you have said in the past that Labour will defend the defence forces, as it were. Can you commit yourself, as the Conservatives have not, to sticking with the 2% GDP target, which is an all-NATO target under your government and under the Conservatives? Britain went around the world saying 2% is very important. Now, it seems that we're not going to carry on doing it.
Well, I think the defence of our country is hugely important. And at a time when you've got instability, the jihadist threat in Africa, in the Middle East, on the Russian borders, we've said, because we won't sign up to the £70 billion of cuts Osborne wants, we will not have defence cuts as deep as the Tories. But we have said, to balance the books, we are going to have cuts in the next Parliament for unprotected departments. What we'll do, though, is we'll have a strategic review of defence before we complete our spending review and see what we can afford.
OK, that answers absolutely everything except the question I asked you, which is that would you stick to the 2%?
The reality is that at the end of the 70s, the number was 5%. It fell under Margaret Thatcher from 5 to 2%. We, Labour, stabilised it around that level, in fact, just above that level,
carry on
all
at that
our
level?
time in Parliament. We're going to have a deficit of £75 billion. We're going to have to make very tough decisions.
So
but
that sounds to me like you wouldn't stick the 2%.
My promise to the armed forces is this. One, we will back you all the way and continue to invest. And secondly, I am not going to sacrifice the defence of our country on an ideological commitment to a 1930s or 1940s level of the state, which, if you protect schools and protect international development, means deep, searing cuts to policing and defence. That's the Osborne plan. Well, it's not Labour's plan.
But you won't commit yourself to the NATO 2%, which is very interesting.
We kept 2% all the time when we were in government.
I'm asking about looking forward. The next government, will you commit to 2% or not?
Our zero-based review is finding savings. I can't sign up now to a commitment until we've opened the books and done the strategic review, but I promise you this, the Tories are the extreme ones on spending cuts, and I'm not going to follow them down that road.
So not 2%, and you do leave the door open to some kind of deal with the SNP?
No, Andrew, we just had that conversation.
We have had that conversation. I'm just summing up for the audience in a friendly way.
It's total nonsense. We're fighting for a majority. The only way in which we'll save the NHS, stop a VAT rise, secure our defences and our policing, and change our economy so it delivers rising living standards for working people is to get a majority Labour government. And you've got Yellow Cameron, who won't debate Ed Miliband, wanting you to ask questions about the SNP. That's the truth, Andrew. You know it.
I think questions about the SNP are jolly interesting, and that came from me as well. Ed Balls for now. Thank you both.
Thank you
very much. Ever since his Hollywood brackpack years, Sean Penn has stood out from his peers. 2 Oscar wins testify to a star who's managed to rise above a troubled past, a criminal record for assault, a rocky marriage to Madonna, and emerge as an actor with real kudos. It was surprising then to find that he had agreed to make a film like The Gunman, his latest blockbuster. It's a high-octane thriller with a twist, set partly in the developing world where Western exploitation is rife. When we met, I asked Sean Penn about his very personal involvement in relief efforts in New Orleans and Haiti, and whether his new action film has a political message.
I don't see the movie as having high aspirations to create political discussion. But it may have an opportunity, by being the kind of movie that it is, to sort of have some of those ideas that are in it filter through to that. I remember a conversation I had once with John Cassavetes where he said, you know, movies are a very powerful thing, and he said, you know, he loved all movies, good movies, bad movies, but if you don't put a few thoughts in it, it misses the boat.
And to what extent is part of the thought in this, you do things in your younger life and then you never get away from them quite. They haunt you, they stay with you all the way through.
Yeah, that's certainly a theme in this.
I did some bad things.
Tell me.
We thought we were helping. Didn't work out that way.
Jim, why are you here?
Someone tried to kill me 3 days ago.
It's a very, very fast pumping film and all the rest. Do you enjoy that kind of highly physical movie? You spend a lot of time either running or being hit or jumping around. It's a very physical movie.
It's a lot to do. Yeah, it's a lot. I did enjoy it. There's an engagement with the other actors or performers in it. It's very precise when doing a lot of that physical stuff that I hadn't had an opportunity to do in the types of movies I'd done previously, and I did have a good time. It's a lot of choreography, and then the hope is that you can maintain the spontaneity and the choreography, and that nobody gets hurt.
Can we talk a bit about your big Oscar-winning film, Milk? Because there again is a sense of a guy, in this case an unambiguous hero really, but who feels that life is short. He hasn't got forever, and of course he doesn't have forever.
Fundamentally, Nigel Farage and indeed Ed Balls are trying to muddy the waters.
Everyone's trying to muddy the waters.
It's a fundamentally different situation for this reason. Nigel Farage is not going to win seats in the House of Commons. He's going to win some. Even on his own estimation, even on his own boasts, he says he's going to win a small handful. The SNP are likely to win dozens of seats because of the collapse of the Labour Party. Ed Miliband can't be Prime Minister without the support of... That creates an alliance between those who want to bankrupt the country and those who want to break up the country.
You know perfectly well there are possible circumstances when the DUP and UKIP could, with the Conservatives, form a government.
We've got such a simple...
It could happen.
We've got such a simple argument in this election, which is you can choose the competence of David Cameron's leadership and the long-term plan that is working, or the chaos of all the alternatives.
OK.
And that is the choice we're putting to the British people in this election.
You can say the same words on your side that Ed Balls wouldn't or couldn't say on his side. You can say, I rule out any deal with UKIP after the election.
That is simply, even engaging with Nigel Farage on this is giving him credibility where he has no credibility.
Say those words and you change the situation.
The truth is, a vote for Nigel Farage is a vote for the Labour Party, a vote for Ed Miliband as Prime Minister, and it means no referendum on Europe. And people need to know that going into those polling.
This feels like a mirror conversation with Ed Balls.
But it is, as I say, it's fundamentally different because of the collapse of the Labour Party in Scotland.
You see,
there are potentially dozens of SNP MPs, nationalists who want to break up our country, and Ed Miliband and Ed Balls are openly contemplating a deal to get themselves into Downing Street on the back of people who want to break up the United Kingdom.
Do you despise Nigel Farage? Do you dislike him? Do you regard him with contempt?
No, I just don't think he's a credible participant in this election because all he does is open the door to a Labour victory, and all the things he says he wants to tackle, like a referendum on Europe or action on welfare and the like, are things that would get worse under a Labour government, the thing that he would facilitate.
There is now a low-level political war going on between the Conservative Party and the defence establishment because you won't allow your colleagues to commit themselves to 2% of GDP, the NATO target on defence. Why won't you do that?
Well, we are meeting our 2% target.
At the moment, but not in the future. It's about the future. It's about the next 5 years.
We've made big commitments in the future to grow the defence equipment budget, to spend £160 billion on the latest aircraft and the latest submarines and the latest equipment for our fighting forces.
But, Chancellor, we're going around the world as a country saying to all the other NATO countries, commit to 2% of GDP on defence. It's really important for NATO, and you won't do it for us.
Well,
Why not?
We are meeting the 2% target.
At the moment, I'm talking about the future.
The right time to decide your defence budget is when you have a strategic defence review and you make an assessment of what Britain needs to pursue its foreign policy interests around the globe.
But you can make you've made long-term commitments.
To make sure that Britain is a presence in every part of our country.
But you've made long-term commitments about the NHS, about overseas aid. Why won't you do it for defence?
I've made a commitment because the defence budget for equipment is something that needs it means many, many years of planning. We've made a commitment to grow the defence budget by 1%. That's £160 billion committed to the latest ships, the latest submarines, the latest aircraft. I was in Portsmouth the other day seeing the work being done to prepare for the two of the largest aircraft carriers the world has ever seen that are coming to the Royal Navy.
Final question, the so-called Google tax. Is it actually possible to tax global companies who aren't paying their fair share of tax in the UK and still have them functioning as effective companies in this country? Google's a very popular company.
Well, I'm not going to refer to any individual companies. The short answer to your question is absolutely yes. We like multinationals being based here. We like them creating jobs here, but they should pay their taxes here as well. And we're the first government to take action. That tax comes into effect at the beginning of next month. We're absolutely serious in attracting investment. We're absolutely serious about people paying their fair share of tax.
George Osborne, for now, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and over to Steph for the news headlines.
Hello. The president of Vanuatu has told the BBC most of his people are homeless after the devastating cyclone that hit the Pacific island nation on Friday. It's thought up to 90% of the homes in the capital have been damaged by Cyclone Pam, along with schools and hospitals. At least 8 people are reported to have been killed, and the authorities have declared a state of emergency. Up to 5 million pensioners are to be given the freedom to cash in their annuity in exchange for a cash lump sum. The measure, due to come into effect in 2016, will be unveiled by Chancellor George Osborne in this week's budget. Speaking earlier on this programme, the Chancellor ruled out any giveaways or gimmicks in this week's budget, saying his priority was a truly national recovery, but that difficult decisions still had to be taken. That's all for me for now. The next news on BBC One is at 1 o'clock. Back to Andrew in a moment, but first a look at what's coming up immediately after this programme.
Join us live from Leicester on Mothering Sunday when we ask, do we discriminate against stay-at-home mums? And for all those disappointed petrol heads, has Britain become hostile to blokes, then ex-Muslims, who lose more than their faith? See you at 10 on BBC One.
The Chancellor is still with me, and we're joined once again by his would-be nemesis, Ed Balls. Welcome back to you both. Now, one of the things that happened at the last election, we've had a long and very, very boring discussion about whether or not there'll be leader interviews. But the last general election, you debated with Alistair Darling and Nick Clegg. Would you do the same thing again with Ed Balls this time round?
Well, I'm sure we'll have a debate of the various finance spokesmen of the different parties. We had one at the last election. But I think it's sensible to let the broadcasters and the party leaders work out their plan, and then we'll work out our plans. But I'm looking forward to it, Ed.
Ed, are you keen on this debate happening?
Of course. In fact, I'd like to go further. George and I don't need the broadcasters to sort these things out. George is not a coward. David Cameron doesn't want a head-to-head with Ed Miliband, but I'm very happy. I will have a head-to-head debate, just the two of us, the two potential chancellors, during the election campaign. And you can say now, are you up for it?
Well, as I say, I'm happy to have these
chancellors'
debates as we did in the last election.
Come on, George, let's go for it.
Well, I'm happy to meet you in a debate.
We should shake on it and go for it. 1 to 1. 1 to 1.
Ed, I'm not going to... I'm happy.
1 to 1.
Well, we're going to see who else wants to be part of that. I've got a very effective chief secretary who I think would also want to be part of that debate.
Now, you may not
if only David Cameron was up for a 1-to-1 debate like George, would be all right. But for some reason, David Cameron's running scared.
I think we should include Danny Alexander.
No, 1-to-1. We just shook on it.
There is a horrible, horrible rumour going around Westminster that actually, although you may disagree on various things, you get on very well. Is that true?
Well, I think we do get on reasonably well.
We spent so much time on this sofa over the years.
I wouldn't say we're the best of friends, but look, I think in politics you do have to try and detach the personal from the professional. And look, we have passionately different ideas about what needs to happen to the country, but that doesn't mean we should be uncivil to each other.
On that very happy note, you want to be best of friends, which leads me very nicely to our music at the end. We're almost out of time. Join us again at the same time next Sunday when my guest will include Alex Salmond. Until then, we leave you with a cast of Beautiful, the Carole King musical currently wowing London's West End. This is something which both my guests here will surely approve of, as they've just showed. You've Got a Friend, a feel-good classic if there ever was one. Take it away.
When you're down and trouble and you need some love and care and nothing is going right, close your eyes and think of me, and soon I will be there to brighten up even your darkest night. You just call out my name, and you know wherever I am, I'll come running to see you again. Winter, spring, summer, or fall, all you have to do is call, and I'll be there, yes, I will. You got a friend.
Now ain't it good to know that you've got a friend when people can be so cold?
They'll hurt you, yes, and desert you. They'll take your soul if you let them. Oh, but don't you let them. You just call out my name, and you know wherever I am, I'll come running, yeah, yeah, to see you again. Oh, baby, winter, spring, summer, or fall.
Winter, spring, summer, or fall.
All you have to do is call, and I'll be there. Yes, I will. You got a friend.